To quote one of the great philosophers of the last century, New York Yankees catcher and coach Yogi Berra, doesn't it feel like deja vu all over again? And to paraphrase Ronald Reagan from his debate with Jimmy Carter, there he goes again. There Jesus goes again. It feels like deja vu all over again. Didn't he already say the Son of a human being is to be betrayed into human hands, and they will kill him, and 3 days after being killed, he will rise again? Well, yes, he did say that already. We got this a couple weeks ago. This is the second prediction of his passion in the Gospel of Mark, and guess what? We're going to get a third prediction of his passion. He is going to say the same thing again. So, well, what is the deal? Is Jesus experiencing a little cognitive decline, forgetting what he said before? My wife will often, oh, by the way, it's my wife's birthday today, so you should... This wife who is celebrating her birthday today will often say to me, "You told me that already." Jesus told us that already. So why the repetition? Now, I remember when our kids were younger, and one of them is here. He's not young anymore. And I often resorted to the 1, 2, 3 count. This is the third time, the final time. I probably never sounded like that, but for the sake of the sermon, I will. This is the third time. You better get yourself upstairs. The first time didn't sink in. The second time didn't sink in. It was necessary to say it 3 times. Jesus had to repeat himself because the news didn't sink in. Honestly, the news was so horrific that the disciples couldn't get it. It was so contrary to what they wanted to hear, so contrary to what their expectations were. The words couldn't existentially sink in. The first time Jesus predicts his passion, Peter says, "God forbid, this can't be." Today, when he predicts his passion, we are told they did not understand what he was saying, and they were afraid. Fearful. They were fearful, and so they wouldn't talk to him or ask him. Now, honestly, Jesus is quite straightforward today. He's going to die. What is not to understand about that? Well, there is a big difference between intellectual understanding and the kind of understanding that is a matter of the truth sinking into the depths of your being, and what often prevents you from truly getting it with all that you are is fear. Fear often stops us from facing reality. Fear often takes us down the road of denial, and as I've said before, denial is not just a river in Egypt. It is often how we cope with what we don't want to face. And if I were one of Jesus' disciples, I wouldn't want to talk about his death either. You know, we just got things going. It's been a lot of fun, and we're accomplishing great things, and now you want to end it all? Today's text reveals how much Jesus' disciples don't understand about Jesus and his movement, about how much they live in denial. When they all come to the big city of Capernaum and are in a house, probably Jesus' house, Jesus asks them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" The way, by the way, is what Jesus' movement was called. As you are involved in the way, as you are involved in discipleship, what are you talking about? Well, at least give the disciples credit. They're honest. Ourselves? We were talking about who is the greatest. We were talking about who has earned more points. We were arguing about who has risen to the top. We were discussing who has gotten the best grades. We were ruminating on who has the most toys, the most money, and the best investments. We were reflecting on who is the best looking, who has the highest poll numbers, on who is truly the most popular. Well, when you don't get what Jesus and his movement are about, when you live lives in denial, this is where you hang out. Life becomes jockeying for position, putting others down so that you can feel better about yourself. By the way, note this, when people start putting other people down, normally it's so that they can feel better about themselves. When you don't get Jesus, when you live in denial, life is all about you. When we face the truth, you're going to die, I'm going to die. We can't live pretending that life is fundamentally about us. Do you think people in hospice are busy checking their investments? Are they busy checking their scorecards, busy counting their money, busy being grateful that at least they're not like the other people, busy trying to figure out who is the greatest? Well, if they are, and once in a while I've seen it, but not very often, if they are steeped in denial, living and dying in light of a lie. And I know that lying seems somewhat acceptable these days, but lying does not bring us what we want. Hospice patients and all of us live and die more peacefully when we face the truth. I like what Richard Rohr has to say about salvation. He says, salvation isn't a matter of if, it's a matter of when. I've been hanging out in the hospice a lot lately, and I got to tell you, most hospice people finally get it. Even if they didn't get it the rest of their life, they get it then. They face the truth about their own mortality and about the fact that we all are in this together. To help his inner circle, the 12, Jesus today does some show and tell. So you were arguing about who was the greatest, huh? And right after I told you I was going to die, well, can I show you who is the greatest? Can I reveal to you who in my world, in what we call the reign of God, matters most? He then takes a little child in his arms and presents him or her before his disciples. We do not know from the text whether it was a girl or boy. You folks who are jockeying for position, thinking that you matter most, believing that you have the highest number of points on your scorecard, well, see this. This child is the greatest. And those who welcome a child like this welcomes me. And those who welcome me welcome not just me, but the God who sent me. Now, we all might get a little tingly at this point because some of us live with very romantic notions about children. They're so cute and they are so innocent, something that most people believe until they have them. But this is not Jesus' view. Children in Jesus' day were the most vulnerable people around. Many children didn't make it through childbirth. Many didn't live through childhood. All children in Jesus' day had no legal standing. It's a real different world these days, but in Jesus' day, they had no legal standing. They, along with their mothers, were remarkably vulnerable. If you want to participate in the way that is Jesus' way, if you don't want to live in denial, pay attention to the vulnerable. To follow the one who is traveling through Galilee and Capernaum and is heading toward Jerusalem, where he will be crucified, is to redefine life, not in terms of power or control. It is not to redefine life through argumentation about who is the greatest, who works the hardest, who accomplishes the most, who's got the most trophies, or who is in the highest leadership position. And by the way, this is not to say that there isn't a need for leaders. I don't believe that at all. We need folks who are willing to be in charge. But listen to Jesus. If you want to be in charge, if you want to lead, you must be last of all and servant of all. I said this the other night, and I've said it many times. I've always told intern pastors, if you want to lead a congregation, you got to realize something. You're going to have to set up chairs sometime. If you're going to lead a congregation, you're going to have to shut windows sometime. If you're going to lead a congregation, you're going to have to do the dirty work. Leadership matters, it really does. But leadership that is the kind that you will find on the way with Jesus is leadership that is willing to do the hard stuff. Look what Jesus does. He gets down on his knees and he washes his disciples' feet. True leadership is leadership that is busy, not ranking people, but rather highlights and lifts up the most vulnerable among us. Now, I must admit to you that for this pastor, I'm speaking from my heart here, lifting up the most vulnerable among us is integral to our faith, which is why I am especially grateful for organizations like Mission for Area People, the Hope Project, Love Inc., Samaritas, formerly Lutheran Social Services, who help us in our work with vulnerable people. We can do so much more when we do it together. But caring for the vulnerable is at the center of our mission. Now, I don't want this to be about me, but nothing angers me more. I'm just being honest here. Nothing angers me more than when vulnerable people are mistreated, when they're easily dismissed, even in the church. The church, people who take the way of Jesus, are especially concerned for the poor and the homeless and the disabled and those with intellectual challenges, the widowed, the abused, the orphan, the stranger, the immigrant, the Haitian refugees, the children being murdered in Gaza, those with dementia, those in hospital and hospice beds, the victims of crimes, and those who are in prison. To mistreat them is to mistreat Jesus, and to mistreat Jesus is to mistreat God. And to argue about who is the greatest when confronted with them, I sure worked harder of any of them, nobody gave me anything, is to miss the point. Life isn't about who is the best, who is the greatest. Life is about a self-giving God. A God who is met in one whose love is so large, so selfless, so preoccupied with the vulnerable that he will go the way of the cross, that he will endure the greatest suffering, that he will take on himself the rejection of the world. While on the way with this God, why would we want to be arguing about who is the greatest? Why would we want to be talking simply about ourselves? And why would we mistreat the vulnerable? I know it's hard to understand the way of Jesus, and I know it's counter to what the culture teaches us, but the way of Jesus, the way of dying, is the way of God. And according to Jesus, it is not just the way of death, but ultimately it is the way of life. And Jesus said to them, the Son of Man is to be betrayed into human hands, and they will kill him. And 3 days after being killed, he will rise again. To be on the way with Jesus ultimately is to be taken into life, new life, resurrected life, life that is so much more fascinating than a boring argument about who is the greatest. Amen.